Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Tuesday. As always, I'm welcoming new joiners, and this is Product People's event. And don't forget that we will be streaming on 4 platforms. It's YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitch. And traditionally, we will have a recording of this session, and it will be available on YouTube. You can share it with your friends or rewatch it again if you wish to, for the insights from the today's session. And as well, we will have a Slido running for you to ask the questions. Here is the QR code. You can already scan it and prepare your questions on the go. So, today's event is, or the topic of today is Tech for Humans, Balancing AI, Web3, and User Experience, and it will be presented by Marija Riba, Senior PM at EG and founder of MVR Studios. So, this is shortly about me. I joined Product People from January and I love it. I'm Executive Operations Manager, and I think this is enough to know about me because I'm not a product person. So let's go. What we do at Product People is we are interim product management providers, and we do product operations and transformation acceleration, but about that a little bit later. And we have community of 60,000 members. Can you imagine? On all our different platforms. So today we have a question for you. And I guess you already scanned the Slido. So the question is the following. When adopting new technologies like AI or blockchain, what do you think is the most important priority for a company? What answers do we have? A, staying ahead of competitors by integrating the latest innovations. Good answer, I think. B, ensuring the technology solves a real user problem. C, maintaining a seamless user experience, even if it means slower adoption. I don't know. And D, balancing innovation with customer trust and expectations. I must admit, those are my opinions and they are not the answers. So please state your answers, and we will come back to this question later. What do we have next? Oh, and the next is, of course, our Maria will be presenting the very interesting topic, and I will disappear now and give the stage to Maria.
Great. Thank you so much, Katie. It's great to be here, and I'm very much looking forward to discussing something that I think has been getting a lot of attention recently in the context of AI. So specifically the tension between innovation and user experience. And for the purposes of this presentation, I kind of want to take you back to the basics to uncover the value behind any new technology that we introduce into our product. So specifically, due to my background, we'll look at Web3 and AI through the lens of user experience. I've prepared some examples from previous companies as well as my current company to illustrate how we should or we shouldn't be thinking about adopting these technologies. And yes, if you are wondering, I tried and failed to generate this presentation with the help of an AI presentation maker. It did give me these very funky presentation illustrations that you can see on the slide, and a very interesting moment that we will get to a little bit later. But not just yet. The first slide is about me. So I've been working in kind of crypto and blockchain and emerging tech for the past 5 years across different product roles. I joined a crypto exchange at the start of the pandemic, and then I moved to a Bitcoin wallet, and then to a blockchain certification platform. Now, if that seems really fast to you, there's a joke in Web3 that a year anywhere is, that like a month is a year anywhere else. So I'm pretty sure that applies to AI as well. And now I'm at a company that does resource allocation and planning software. So last summer, I moved to Finland from the UK, and I found this job in Silverbucket, which is part of EG. It's a Nordic company that is focused on vertical software. And Silverbucket is a little bit of an outlier here, because what we do is used by all sorts of industries, but we are very deeply embedded into three main sectors, which is engineering, manufacturing, and IT. And then a big focus at EG is actually on AI, which we use to both help our customers, but also ourselves with things like internal tooling. And I have to admit that Silverbucket at the moment does not use AI outside of any internal tooling, but we are well on our way to building for customer needs states. And we have, for example, modules that use algorithmic calculations for selecting the best human resource for projects. This isn't AI actually, but a lot of our customers have been asking whether it is. We are also exploring use cases that already exist within EG. So things like AI support tools, and I mean things like, release notes summarized by an AI for the help center, or being able to filter things using natural language, not necessarily just things like a chatbot, although we have that as well. And then, AI assistants that are trained on on proprietary data, and then kind of we can interface with through the system. But I think before we get into all of that, we need to start with the really big question of why. So it's really important to set the scene here and say that I'm not a technical product manager. I am more of a strategic product manager. So I focused on things like, why do we do things? You see this beautiful AI generated why. And therefore, kind of, I want to use this time to establish some ground rules of what this presentation will be about and what it won't be about. So from my side, what I can offer is real life examples that are focusing on user problems that we're solving with Web3 or AI, versus how sometimes new technology exists as a solution to a problem that doesn't exist or that users don't really care about. And what I won't be able to do, so what's out of scope, is give you an in-depth overview of Web3 architecture or training AI data models or anything like that. And I ask you to please bear that in mind for the questions later. However, what we will do is we will touch on, I skipped ahead a little bit. We will touch on the business and product considerations of the strategic as well as the technical side. And now we can move on to the next one. So I have to admit, I almost feel a little bit like a fraud talking to you today, because there are so many very intelligent and qualified people that are out there doing really cool things with new tech. But this also reveals the problem somewhat, because we get distracted by the tech. And just because someone isn't coding doesn't mean that the work that they're doing is not valuable. So I think oftentimes we get so caught up in the bubble that I've seen this happen time and time again, especially in crypto companies, where we forget the most important thing is actually what problem are we solving for users. And this is incidentally a common observation when we talk about adoption, right? I was once on a panel with a woman who had been an early adopter of Bitcoin, or I think other kind of blockchain-based currencies. And she likens this to the success of Skype. rest in peace, Skype. Sorry. And no one caring about voice over internet protocol, because you shouldn't really care about the underlying technology. It's the same thing about blockchain. You shouldn't really care about the blockchain itself. And of course, it has significant advantages such as security and permanence, but ultimately it's about the problem that it solves for the user. So in my opinion, there are, of course, absolutely valid crypto and NFT use cases. For example, rapid money transfers or the store of value, or even the kind of transfer of personal data. But the technology is a facilitator for the actual problems that are being solved. So the underlying technology is secondary. The main thing is helping you to achieve your goals quickly and easily. So coming back to the Skype example, Skype helped you connect to relatives across the world without paying exorbitant fees. And that's the value of it. Now, I do want to sound a little bit of a note of caution, because AI is a bit of a different beast. The inputs that we are kind of using to train the data models, they do matter, and they can replicate existing inequalities or spread misinformation. So that is important, but it's somewhat of a different conversation to what we're discussing now. And then the other thing that I really want to highlight from my fellow panelists from that session observation is that it really benefits from hindsight, right? Because we know, as we knew then, that Skype is solving this particular problem. But what we didn't know at the time is whether the Skype protocol would win over the other types of protocols that were being developed. And I can't say that I know the history in very much detail, but I would hazard a guess that part of the reason that Skype was ultimately successful is because of the user experience. And I also think that blockchain and crypto and NFTs, and especially AI, they do add value. But my overarching point is more that we as product managers need to look past the technology and solve for users. As such, when it comes to our users, we need to get to know them so well that we anticipate their needs. So we need to build those solutions without worrying about the underlying technology. There's often this quoted Henry Ford statement, right, about if he had asked users what they wanted, they would have said a faster horse, which of course doesn't make that much sense for a number of reasons, not the least because Ford did not invent the car. It was just the first mass-produced car. But if you look more closely at what this is trying to say, it's about user need states. So users wanted to get somewhere faster, and they wanted to be able to afford it. And of course, we know that users won't always be able to articulate what they want. And if they do, then that's something to be wary of, because it might turn us into a feature factory. But what they do reveal is this underlying need. And then good UX and good product management is about anticipating and delivering on those unspoken needs. You'll note that on this slide, I have actually added a screenshot that says anticipate needs. Users want faster horses, need better transport options. So where this came from is that I actually tried to generate this with AI, and it provided a very helpful summary of what I just mentioned to you. So let's think about it a little bit differently. What was the last interaction that you had with AI? And bonus points if it isn't like a search query through ChatGPT or anything like that, but rather AI embedded into a product. So it could be anything as basic as a support chatbot, or it could be predictive text, or something more complicated like this presentation generator or a calculations wizard. What was the experience like? Because I doubt that I'm only speaking for myself when I say that most of them are shockingly bad. AI chatbots can be very, very frustrating. They don't always direct you to the useful advice that you need. they won't necessarily connect you to a human who will be able to help you. Predictive text often feels very superfluous. And yeah, as we already know about the presentation maker, sometimes it gives you very funny text. So why do companies keep doing this? I think there's a genuine reason, which is that companies believe that their product is solving a real pain point and they're training their models. Though I still have some reservations about the predictive text and especially this presentation generator. But then other common reasons include things like they're afraid of being left behind, maybe there's investor pressure, but I think we can say that in most cases it's about hype. And the irony is that there is much more harm from a poor user experience as a result of integrating these technologies before its time than if they had focused on solving real user needs. One really positive, actually, example that I can mention about this is Notion. And what I think Notion did really, really well, it's this tiny feature. It basically, you take a link and you paste it onto words and it directly hyperlinks it. And so I've only really come across this in Notion and also in Slack. Even though having thought about this, I think that it's very rare that you will want to replace the highlighted text with a URL, at least in a tool like this, right? That being said, they also have predictive text. So maybe somebody in the audience has positive experiences of that. I would be really interested to hear it. I have not found that it adds particularly a lot of value to my work. But coming back to the value of this new technology, the business objectives are typically to drive more revenue or to increase adoption or any of the other examples here. And the way that we can do that is by ensuring that users achieve their goals faster and providing a smooth user experience while we're doing it. And absolute kudos if we can surprise and delight them as we do it, right? So in other words, I think it's very often these small hyperlinks rather than these big predictive text features that matter to users. So that kind of brings us to the question of who uses new tech and for what purposes. I think there are numerous types of personas. There's, the early adopter who just wants to try it out for the sake of trying something new. There's the marketer who might want to use new tech to generate hype around the brand. But I think these always need to be assessed in or against the business objectives. So, for example, marketing intention, it may or may not be a very meaningful metric by which we then measure product success, unless it's ultimately converting and then retaining users, which is frankly a little bit unlikely. And it's a lesson I learned while working at the Bitcoin wallet, but more on that later. So what benefits are there in Web3 and AI? Of course, we haven't, reached the mass adoption of Skype circa 2013, and it remains to be seen whether we will from a consumer side. I think this is an important point because from a consumer side, there's a disconnect between the promise, which is in crypto at least a store of value, and the reality, which tends to be speculation. And then the same when we talk about NFTs. So the promise, owning intellectual property, against the reality, which is, again, primarily speculation. So while the technology is promising, the why hasn't been fully addressed. But blockchain is being used in a business sense. It's being used in government and business applications. For example, Estonian and American governments have started implementing things through and using blockchain for privacy and security reasons. And also governments and big businesses store value in Bitcoin. And then when we think about AI, I think we're a bit closer, but there's still similarities. I think there's a matter of time before we get to a mass adoption stage. For example, My mother regularly uses DeepL, I think it's called, DeepL for checking her English, and then neurodiverse acquaintances have mentioned using ChatGPT to just tackle mundane, simple emails that would otherwise take them hours. So there's these kind of simple tasks that are being simplified by using AI. Now, finally, we get to the part where we can consider some practical examples. And first up is exactly what I was just talking about. So this example of a company that failed to find product market fit among consumers, but did manage to do it for businesses. So a few years ago, I was working at a mission-driven crypto startup, looking to bring Bitcoin to emerging markets as a harder currency in which to save. So the theory went that it's a harder currency than the local fiat, and therefore it would be better to save in Bitcoin rather than in the local currency, which would be subject to inflation and then devalued. We were kind of gamifying that experience, rewarding users in small amounts of Bitcoin. And in parallel, we were building this business wherein everything was done by the book. We complied with regulations, we received all the necessary licenses, we partnered with banks and authorities in target markets, which of course wasn't without its challenges, primarily financial. But what it kind of resulted in is that we realized that our target audience wasn't actually able to fund this. It wasn't able to sustain our business growth ambitions. And while the marketing efforts that I mentioned previously, they paid off, but they weren't able to retain users, or we weren't seeing enough traction to actually make money. And here, I have to admit that I was young and a bit naive, because I was so committed to this mission as central to the product. And so for me, the technology and the mission became inextricably entwined. And so I focused on the technology more so than the use cases or the business outcomes. So what was important to the users? It was earning and saving money in a way that would not put them at the risk of high inflation. But was Bitcoin the only way to do that? There was a steep learning curve, and ultimately there was no value to us because we incentivized them to save as opposed to spend. So the CEO then decided to pivot and leveraged all of our banking partnerships and licenses to actually improve that experience of transferring money for bigger, like higher net worth individuals and big businesses. So essentially using the same tech stack, but doing it for a different user group. And I kind of saw this as a betrayal of our ideals. As I said, it was a bit naive of me. And so I left the company. But with this wisdom of hindsight, I recognized that this use case actually solves a real problem and adds value to a different group of users. And so basically using that same tech and partner stack for solving B2B transactions and actually being able to make money. The users, the B2B users, they don't really care that the money is being transferred through blockchain. They just care that it's cheap and it gets their funds to highly regulated markets in a compliant and regulated manner. Then another example is from the last company that I worked for. It was the founding mission of which was the ability to register certificates of authenticity for physical artworks on the blockchain as a permanent record. And this is something that really matters to artists because they want to track provenance. In other words, the new technology was a way in which to not only improve this kind of security of it to make sure that it was tamper-proof, that it wasn't fraudulent, but also to ensure that it was permanent. The issue was a slightly different one. It was about adoption. So I think this is a problem for the art world generally. There isn't a single database of certificates of authenticity. And the reason for that is that each artist, gallery, museum, or whatever it may be, issues their own, which makes them obviously difficult to track and then authenticate. And the idea, therefore, identified a use case. So through blockchain, this now became more possible. But the same issue transferred into blockchain, which is that in order for these certificates to continue to exist as they are intended to, they needed to be transferred alongside the artwork. And that left it in the hands of the collectors. This was then further complicated by the emergence of NFTs. And our company entered that space. So NFTs, or non-fungible tokens, they were intended first and foremost as proof of ownership in and of themselves, because you demonstrably can own the NFT, you therefore own the underlying art, and all of this is publicly visible on the blockchain. It's also transacted on the blockchain, so you have that provenance. But instead of doubling down on the use case and pursuing the vision of establishing an immutable repository of certificates, we actually focused on the technology and tried to certify NFTs alongside physical works. So, I mean, this was in addition to a couple of other things such as minting and token gating, but essentially the primary use case was about the certification. Now, the logic was that NFTs can also be faked. It's easy to make an NFT with an underlying image that isn't your artwork. Of course, the NFTs themselves track which address created the NFT. So for artists for whom this matters, will be able to prove or disprove their ownership anyway. But furthermore, the underlying IP became quite a contentious point, because some artists, they sell their NFTs with T's and C's that state that you don't actually own the underlying IP. In my view, that sort of defeats the purpose, but this is how certain artists have proceeded, which makes it much more complicated. So how does this then all reflect on the problem that we were trying to solve? Well, the issue is that the decisions that we were making, so pursuing NFTs in parallel to certification, were directly contradicting the why, which is establishing authenticity of certification. Before I left, we were developing certificates as NFTs for physical assets, which was then implemented shortly afterwards. This had a slightly different issue, which was, do these certificate NFTs hold any value without the underlying asset? And how do we ensure that that underlying asset is tied to the certificate? And then, of course, the very big one, which is this solving a very niche problem in a very complicated way? And that takes us back to adoption, which is really driven by the ability to simplify user needs. I think the most important takeaway here is that before getting too carried away with how to build a solution, it's important to determine that the problem being solved matches the business's objectives. And finally, let's talk a little bit about AI and a dilemma that I think many companies are now confronting as they identify use cases that can help their users, which is build or buy. And this brings me to my current company. EG has many products that have already introduced or are in the process of introducing AI. I'm not familiar with all of them. It's a big portfolio. So I will focus on one that was recently validated with users. So another product in our portfolio is an ERP, which is an enterprise resource planning solution. And it covers everything from financials to access permissions. And one thing that they identified was requiring a lot of manual work is purchase invoicing. So over 65% of customers reported that they would use AI automation for this. and the rest would likely follow once they saw the benefits. And then they even said that time-wise, automating that process would save them upwards of 20 hours per month. This kind of repetitive process with clear parameters is ripe for AI automation. But then it begs the question, so why specifically AI? And this one is because it needs to account for nuance in the business operations. So different companies have different parameters, different operating procedures that AI can then learn from and make recommendations that are suitable for those particular customers. And I think that's why the complex processing of cost allocation has not produced sufficiently good enough result with rule-based processing. And I think so this kind of solution, it comes with additional considerations of trade-offs. So when we talk about build or buy, the real question that we're asking is time to market versus long-term value. Who builds it and who handles the legal questions like data processing. Within this, also kind of worth bearing in mind, this breakneck speed of AI and all the changes that are incoming at a constant basis. So in EG, I think while we have the skills in-house, there's a large roadmap for AI innovation. So the faster solution and faster time to market would be to buy. However, we do recognize that that's a slight problem because we need to own the data models. Otherwise, they can be reused and it would affect our competitiveness, especially if competitors then use something that's similar and we're able to have access to our business logic and even customer data, although it would, of course, be anonymized. So while we would have probably bought maybe 2 years ago, I think now we're much more aware of the risks, and our developers are now equipped with AI-powered tools. So now building it in-house makes a lot more sense. And I think in any discussion of build versus buy, it's worth looking at those trade-offs and making the decision that's right for your company. In Silverbucket specifically, we, have identified very many areas, I think even a discussion earlier today, where we could 100% improve usability through AI. Especially, I think there's this discussion that's ongoing, which is not just helping through an AI tool, but actually creating an interface where the user can then engage with AI directly. So I think the most important thing to recognize is what is relevant to the use case. And a good example of this is the fact that we don't need to screen easy customer support queries, for example, because we don't typically get queries that don't require engineering. So until we can, create an AI solution that will take into consideration the query, be able to answer it, and then also do the engineering part for us, there's not really a need for a chatbot, for example. So it's something more in depth than that. We need to build an interface, or we need to build kind of AI logic into the system rather than looking for easy wins like that. There was a Microsoft webinar fairly recently where they were talking about co-pilots and how the future is an interface wherein we get to chat to our AI assistant, the co-pilot, so to say, which then orchestrates the automation of multiple AI agents to achieve this result that we want. And I think at Silverbucket, we're still quite a ways away from that sort of interface, but we could already be learning from that approach and improving our usability. So everything from our onboarding to data extraction, like how do we facilitate the user's intended result in the easiest way possible without this blocker of what technology is going to be used. It's how do we solve for this particular problem and what is going to make the most sense. And I think more and more frequently we're answering AI to that question. So even though the question itself is not AI centric, it can end up being an AI centered product development. But the important takeaway is that we're focusing on the customer need and the pain point rather than the immediate jumping immediately to the solution, which could or could not be AI, depending on the situation. So really, that was kind of it, short and sweet. But the main takeaway from me is that companies need to solve real pain points, and the technology is just there as a facilitator. We're just using it to address those points in a much quicker way. And if we use it correctly, our users benefit. And if we don't, then we are potentially alienating them or giving them a very poor user experience and decreasing adoption rather than increasing it. And the only thing that I think we can really rely on with certainty is continuous discovery. So we watch users, we speak to them, we look at product analytics, we explore their need states, we understand how to solve those problems that they're having. And I think that the important thing to note is that those solutions can be using this new technology, but they also could be simple fixes that don't require any emerging tech. So to conclude, I want to leave you with this, which is innovation should always serve the customer, not the trend. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. Wow, that was an awesome presentation. I liked it so much. These are the topics that interest me personally, like in particular, cryptocurrencies, to be honest, which is connected to the blockchain. And I remember also having OpenSea when NFTs were a hype. But yeah. Anyway, it was super interesting. Thank you for your presentation. And here is the code again of the Slido for asking the questions. And meanwhile, I will just go through and say what exactly this I promised a little bit before, that I will tell in more details what we do as product people. So it's the best to contact us if you need an interim or a fractional product manager. We can cover anything from 3-12 months, and in case of need. And we also do program and product operations. Yes, and also transformation acceleration. Well, you see it on the slide. Everything is written. Let's move on. This is our impressive portfolio. We serve B2C and B2B clients as well, and have already had the experience with 300 cross-functional teams. We have around 42 product leaders in-house, and our leadership, which is amazing, consists of 6% of female leaders, which I find fascinating. So I hope everyone who wanted to ask the questions already asked, and I see some of them already. Maria, are you ready to answer the questions? So,
Absolutely.
first one is, how do you ensure that AI solutions genuinely solve user problems rather than just being innovative for the sake of it? So,
I think, yeah, that's a very topical question. It's about, at least to me, it's about really digging deep, understanding those need states. So personally, what I've begun doing with my team is getting us all together, really looking at the personas for whom we're solving, and thinking from their perspective, what is going to be the easiest way to address the particular thing that they're solving. So, for example, today we were talking about permissions. So in our system, it's very complicated to see the different types of user rights that different roles will have in Silverbucket specifically. So they could be spread across the entire entire platform, but they could also be project based. So you could have certain roles in a specific project versus a completely different role for the entire organization. And somebody who's an admin might want to see who has rights for this particular project. And if you have, tens of thousands of resources, it can get very tricky to identify the specific user that you want to see the permissions for. So with a problem like this, you're thinking, how can we solve this with what we already have? In which case it's really a UI question. So how do we give them the access to the information that they want in the simplest way? But then when you start thinking about AI, because AI can also be, as I mentioned, a co-pilot, it can be an assistant, it could be an interface. Then you think, well, what is stopping me from dreaming big and saying, why not just go and ask AI that question? Have the AI completely trained on our platform, understand our platform and all of the intricacies of who has what access right, and be able to just go in and ask, hi, what is this person's rights for this particular project? I mean, that's dreaming big. For us, that's quite far in the future. But right now, we need to solve also the business objectives. So we need to solve that particular issue with UI without necessarily AI. So I think my answer to this is really, it's about timing, like how fast do we want to solve the issue? And then what is our vision for solving the issue in the future? So it's taking it step by step.
Great. And I actually have heard about this in-house AI things that can retrieve stuff from your own documentation. So let's go to the next question now, which is, what skills do you think future product managers need to develop to work efficiently with AI? So that's
I think it is a very interesting question, because I think it's like, kind of coming back to my presentation, I don't think that it's necessarily new skills. So it depends on what kind of product manager you are. When we talk about a strategic product manager, like myself, like I don't work very closely with the tech, so I'm not technical product manager. In my case, I don't need to know the intricacies of what is going into the data model. Like, I will probably have questions about it and I will want to know, but I won't have to know that in order to make business-driven decisions. So again, I think the answer is really, it depends. So for probably a technical product manager, you will need to know the intricacies of how those things work, how the large language models work, how the inputs work, how asking specific questions work. But in terms of the strategy and asking the why, you really just need to have those same product management skills that you have already, which is, what problem are you solving for?
Great. Well, that gives a hope to many product managers or aspiring product managers, right? Separation between technical and non-technical domains. So let me see. Okay, let's ask one last question. So somebody is asking, we started talking about blockchain long before AI, yet AI adoption skyrocketed. Does blockchain have a fewer use cases, or its adoption just slower? That's also an interesting question, right?
I agree. And I think that it really depends on what we mean by slower, right? And I think I don't have the data to hand, so I don't know whether it's slower or not. I think we are seeing a similar hype cycle as we saw with blockchain, but now with AI. And I also think that there are a lot of blockchain adoption. So exactly what I was referencing to in my presentation about businesses looking at using blockchain to get information quickly, to get money transfers sent more quickly, to store value. It's being done on a B2B scale more so than maybe a B2C scale. With AI, I think it's a little bit it's similar. Of course, businesses are also looking at AI applications, but I think very often the business applications of AI are customer centric. So when we talk about things that are, for example, ChatGPT, there's a lot more consumers who are then going in and using ChatGPT or Claude AI or whichever other platforms there are in order to, generate copy, generate texts, images, all sorts of things. So I think consumers now realize that they have those capabilities and they're actively using them. Whereas with blockchain, it was very much focused on, I think the use case at that time was very speculative, and therefore it's just a slightly different use case. So I don't know that I would 100% agree that AI is being adopted more than blockchain on all aspects, because I think there's a lot of blockchain adoption as well, especially on a B2B level. But I do agree that on a consumer level, it's probably true.
Yes, and what I can add from my side is that I think a lot of companies are trying to make blockchain adoption easier for uh, broader population by making this user experience and interface like easier to grasp. Maybe that's the first barrier, could be that hinders blockchain adoption on a very, very wide scale. But I also believe that it's coming. Okay, let's go. And I personally like the fast transactions a lot.
Me
um,
too.
One more question is, how do you see the balance between AI adoption and job displacement, and what role do companies have in supporting the people affected by these changes?
I think that is such an important question, because I think that we are seeing disruption, right? And we're seeing disruption on a big scale. And I think that this has happened throughout history with a lot of different innovations coming in, changing some jobs, disrupting jobs, people losing jobs, but then retraining and being able to use that same technology to kind of grow in their careers. So I think I don't want to sound blasé about it, because of course it's painful for a lot of people and it's definitely a concern. I think AI is not there yet to fully replace people. I think we've seen so many examples of this, of people being let go only to then be asked back because AI proved not to be able to handle the same things as humans are able to handle. But I do think that kind of looking ahead and seeing how this evolves, it's just going to require people whose jobs are very automation based, for example, which is something that AI will disrupt. How can they then retrain in order to do something that is still beneficial, either working with this technology or maybe changing fields entirely? So while disruption is kind of a fact of life, I think it's also about how we can take that and use it to still build something that will work for us. And I think to your point about what role do companies have in supporting those people, this is very much an open question, right? I think companies should be doing this. It's kind of not my place to say whether they will or will not, but I definitely hope that they will.
Thank you so much for the answer. And thank you for all those people who asked these interesting questions. Let's see. Yes, we are hiring. Feel free to scan the QR codes if you're interested in product management jobs and subscribe to our newsletter. And I must announce our next Tuesday event topic, live stream topic, is Speed as Habit, Mastering Time to Market in Product Management. And I already made a joke that I need to attend this, this one. Okay, so I think we're done here. Um, Thank you everyone for joining and for asking the questions. Thank you, Maria, for super interesting presentation and insights into world of something that is not yet adopted on a wide scale. For me, it was interesting, and I agree with you that that the AI is not there yet. Sometimes I get a little bit annoyed by the results that I get, but that's also something that one should train from both sides, from AI and from the person, how to interact with it, right? Um, yeah, let's finish the presentation. I'm grateful for everyone, grateful for our tech hosts, and we are done. Thank you very much and see you. I will not see you, but someone will see you